Hey guys, Pastor Ben here with another review and reflection. As I mentioned in my last video, I'm staying at a friend's house on a few days of study break, so that's why I've got the beautiful lake behind me. I had to kind of shift my setup a little bit because the sun was creeping in, kind of making it hard to see things. And I definitely want you to be able to see this book that I'm going to be talking to you about. It's a wonderful book, a beautiful book. It's called The Mansoul Chronicles, Book 1, The Fall and Rise of Mansoul. This is something that we just finished going through as a family in our family worship at the beginning of the year. It was a Christmas gift that we gave to our kids. My wife found this book a little while back. It's published by Lithos Kids, and it is the first volume, and what's supposed to be a kind of 3-volume work, but it is a kind of updated text, newly illustrated children's version of a wonderful allegory by the Puritan John Bunyan. So many of you will be familiar with The Pilgrim's Progress, and there's a wonderful kids version of that that's been beautifully illustrated called Little Pilgrim's Progress. I've done a video review of that on my channel previously. I'll try to post a link to that below. We've read that now 3 times as a family. We went through it twice. And then after my daughter died, after Emma died, we stopped what we were doing in family worship at that point and went back to Little Pilgrim's Progress. And I just have to say, I mean, it was a totally different experience reading it after having lost a child. Maybe I'll have to do another review just because different things were striking us at that point. But that's a wonderful, wonderful book. And there are many, many children's versions of Pilgrim's Progress that have been made over the years. However, Bunyan wrote lots and lots of books, I think 70 plus books, many of which were books of sermons or theology, like many Puritans of his day, but also he wrote more allegories. And one of his lesser known, but still wonderful allegories is a book called The Holy War. This book is an attempt to retell that allegory. It's a children's version of Bunyan's book, The Holy War. And so what they've done is they've taken that and they have broken it up into 12 chapters, and they tell the story, and then at the end of each chapter they have a kind of summary of the story that you can read, and it has scripture passages and things, and then it has sort of some questions or prompts that you could use to understand the allegory that you've read in that chapter, and then how to apply the allegory to your own life. So it's very much set up for family worship, although you could also just give it to your kids to read themselves. There's a variety of ways of using it, but it's really phenomenal. Let me tell you a little bit more about the story itself, and then I'll go through a couple features of the book and kind of give my final thoughts. So the story itself, as I said, is an allegory called The Holy War. And what Bunyan is doing in that book is to, again, as he does with Pilgrim's Progress, trying to use a sort of what we would almost think of as a sort of fantasy setting, right? It's about castles and adventures and armies and all these kinds of things. He wants to use kind of that setting to help us understand and picture and appreciate biblical and Christian truth. So he's trying to kind of live theology out through story. Of course, we know how he does it with Pilgrim's Progress. He follows the progress of Christian, this pilgrim who travels from the city of destruction to the celestial city. And so what you're seeing there is a kind of allegorical representation of what the Christian life looks like in response to the good news of the gospel. Well, the Holy War, at least this part of the Holy War, book 1 here, is trying to give an allegorical representation of the story of the gospel itself. So it's kind of walking you through that story of creation, fall, and redemption. That's kind of as far as we get here. So it's retelling the story of creation, the story of man's fall, the story of God's redemption of man through the sacrifice of his son, and the victory of his son over the forces of darkness and of evil. That's the kind of narrative arc that we have here. And the way that this is done in this volume, similar to, although it's a different set of people who are doing this, but similar to the Little Children's Progress that I have reviewed before, which I was talking about a minute ago, it newly illustrates and provides updated text and recast the story as a kind of these kind of anthropomorphic animals, right? So we have here, you can get a feel for the illustrations, right? So this is King Shaddai, the creator, God figure, and the citizens here of this town, because the story begins with Shaddai as the creator. You can see again just these beautiful illustrations as the creator speaking out and creating this town of Mansoul. So I'll just give you a second to look at this. Okay, and so Mansoul, of course, represents the soul of man that God himself makes, and Shaddai fills Mansoul with his image. He provides them with everything they need. It's this beautiful, unspoiled thing. And then we get to hear about the treason and treachery of some of Shaddai's creatures in heaven. This angel who becomes the fallen angel, Diabolus, representing Satan and his minions, who seek to rebel against Shaddai's son, Emmanuel, right? And how these rebels are cast down to earth, and how they then seek to overthrow the town of Mansoul. And so we get that whole account. You can see here, again, I'll show you some pictures, both because I want you to see how beautiful they are. Also, if you're wondering what age it's good for, may depend on how sensitive your kids are to pictures of dragons and things. Mine are all at the age where they love this, but if you've got really little kids, maybe that's scary. So just, exercise your discernment. But he does a wonderful job of, again, portraying the story of the Bible, but in this fresh way. It's very biblical, though. He's a Puritan author, and I've been very impressed with the way that the folks at Lithos Kids have put this together, because they've maintained the kind of elevated, high fantasy language, and it's beautifully illustrated. It's not kind of little kiddish at all, which kind of drives me nuts, when people do that. So I like the way that they're doing this. It shows sensitivity to the subject matter, the text, the genre, all of that. But it also does a good job of presenting it in a way that, my kids they're always like eager for family worship at some level, but they were like itching, to read more chapters every time. We just read one chapter a day, so we went through it in, 12 days. But they always wanted to read more, and they always wanted to kind of peek ahead and see the next pages. And it is just, again, I know I've said this before, but it's a beautiful book. Very solid, very well produced, good binding. It's got this ribbon you can use, gold engraving here. The artwork is phenomenal, very well illustrated. Gives you a little introduction about John Bunyan and his kind of history and context. Like I said, each chapter provides parents with a summary that they can then read to their kids, which kind of draws out the connection between the story they just read and the story of Scripture. And there's even further questions you could use to kind of drive that home or draw that out more. And it basically takes you through the creation, the fall of Satan, the fall of man, and then man's redemption through Emmanuel. And then it kind of ends, with this kind of leading, ominous note, in one sense, that, Satan, Diabolus, the dragon, has been diminished and cast out, but we know he'll come back to attack the city. And so future volumes are going to flesh out more of that story of the Holy War and how Emmanuel defends the city that he has redeemed and claimed for himself. So I'm really, really, really excited to see the future volumes. We'll be snapping them up as soon as they come out. I think volume 2, book 2, is supposed to be coming out this year, 2026, I believe. And I'm hoping the final volume will follow shortly afterwards. But we are huge fans of this book. And it's a story that should be better known. It pairs very well with Pilgrim's Progress. I think some people will kind of, they'll look at Pilgrim's Progress and they'll analyze the allegory, and sometimes they'll critique Bunyan for, this or that. And sometimes Bunyan's not above critique, right? But I think sometimes people are critiquing him because they're expecting him to do everything in one book. And that's not really what he's doing. I think if you want to get Bunyan's full allegorical vision, you need to read Pilgrim's Progress and you need to read The Holy War. And if you're looking for a way to introduce your children to this story, this is a great way to do that. So, highly, highly, highly recommend. Five stars out of 5 stars. The Mansoul Chronicles, Book 1, The Fall and Rise of Mansoul.